Returning to debate, the Honourable Member for Davenport.
Thank you so much, Mr. Speaker. I will be sharing my time with the Honourable Member of Don Valley West. Mr. Speaker, it's an absolute honour for me to stand in the House of Commons today on behalf of the residents of my riding of Davenport to speak to the invocation of the Emergencies Act. Before I continue, I would like to acknowledge that I'm speaking on the traditional territory of the Algonquin Nation. Mr. Speaker, earlier this week on February 14, our federal government declared a public order emergency and invoked the Emergencies Act. This was the first time this act was used since it was created in 1988. There are clear conditions set out in the Emergency Act in order for the public order emergency to be declared. The Act was invoked only after exhausting other options. It is time-limited to 30 days. It is geographically targeted. It proposes measures that are reasonable and proportional to the threats they are meant to address, and they do not displace or replace provincial and territorial authorities. This was done after discussions with Cabinet and Caucus, after consultations with the premiers from all provinces and territories, and after speaking with opposition leaders. I support this decision. For almost 3 weeks now, blockades have been illegally disrupting the lives of Canadians, harming our economy and endangering public safety. The Freedom Convoy 2022 has created a critical, urgent, temporary situation that is national in scope and cannot effectively be dealt with under any other law of Canada. The blockades of the ports of entry have disrupted the transportation of crucial medicine, goods, fuel, and food to Canadians, and are causing significant adverse effects on Canada's economy, relationship with trading partners, and supply chains. These trade disruptions, the increase in criminal activity, the occupation of downtown Ottawa, the lawlessness, and the threats of violence, as well as the presence of firearms, constitute a public order emergency, an emergency that arises from threats to the security of Canada that is so serious as to be a national emergency. What may have started as a protest by truck drivers against border mandates had quickly morphed into a rallying point for anti-vaccination, anti-government, anti-authority, and white supremacist groups, with demands ranging from an end to all public health restrictions to the overthrow of an elected government. At occupations and blockades across the country, we have seen harmful, racist, violent behavior and attempts to minimize or discount the harm done to Canadians. Mr. Speaker, it was also clear that there were serious challenges and gaps to local law enforcement's ability to effectively enforce the law. It is clear that extraordinary measures had to be taken to keep Canadians safe, protect people's jobs, and restore confidence in our institutions. Canada, at the very core of our existence, is a country that fundamentally believes in and is governed by the rule of law. In our blood and in our soul, we believe in peace, order, and good government. Mr. Speaker, over the last 3 years, we did not see peace and order in specific parts of our nation, and especially here in Ottawa. There was a complete shutdown of key parts of Centretown due to the occupation, stopping people from going to work, stopping businesses from reopening, making people unable to carry on with their normal lives. The first week of the occupation had an unprecedented amount of noise, which caused great distress to all those living in or near the occupation. It seriously impacted the mental health of nearby Ottawa residents, a mental health that had already been fragile for many due to the unprecedented pandemic that we have all had to live through over the last couple of years. At the Ambassador Bridge in Windsor, Ontario, trucker convoys blocked the bridge crossing, stopping trade from moving between the United States and Canada, a border point that sees over $400 million of trade per day. Many Canadians were temporarily laid off, and the economies of both countries impacted. But worse, our reputation as a place to do business with ease across our two borders was greatly impacted. Our Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Finance said that the disruptions have shaken Canada's reputation as a place in which to invest and do business. She further said the world is watching us, and that our jobs, our prosperity, and our livelihoods are endangered, and we will not allow Canada's privileged trading relationship with the United States to be compromised. This was not the only border crossing that was impacted. We saw trucker blockades in Coutts, Alberta, and in Emerson, Manitoba. The impact economically is $48 million and $73 million in trade each day, respectively, and the threat exists for other border crossings across our country. And then, Mr. Speaker, and then there were the guns. In Coutts, Alberta, protesters have been charged with conspiracy to commit murder, the murder of police officers, and a large cache of guns and ammunition were seized by the RCMP. All of these actions and threats demanded that our federal government take extraordinary actions. But it's important to note, Mr. Speaker, that this act does not suspend the Charter of Rights and Freedom. In fact, the act was created to flow from and uphold the Charter. The Act's preamble explicitly states that any measures taken under the Act must be compliant with Charter rights. The invocation of the Act does not limit freedom of speech, does not limit peaceful assembly, and does not prevent people from exercising their right to protest legally. We are reinforcing the principles, values, and institutions that keep all Canadians free. Mr. Speaker, the Emergency Act also provides additional powers to stop the flow of money that has been funding these trucker blockades and occupation. Leaked data has shown that the majority of the donors, over 50%, has been coming from outside of the country, primarily the United States. When police notified GoFundMe that the funds that they were collecting were being used for unlawful purposes, the campaign was shut down. Protesters then turned to Christian crowdfunding site called Give, Send, Go, which raised almost $11 million. In order to stop the flow of funds for these illegal blockades and occupation, the Emergency Act included 4 key financial measures. From a press release and announcement that our Deputy Prime Minister made earlier this week, we learned a lot about the details. The first of those measures is that the Act extends the scope of Canada's anti-money laundering and anti-terrorism financing rules to cover crowdfunding platforms and the payment processors they use. This change covers all forms of transactions, including digital assets, such as cryptocurrencies. Secondly, the order directs Canadian banks, insurance companies, and other financial service providers to temporarily cease providing financial services where the institution suspects that an account, either personal or corporate, is being used to further the blockades. The Act also enables and directs Canadian financial institutions to review the relationship with anyone involved in the illegal blockades and report the assets and related transactions of those involved to the RCMP or to CSIS. The fourth measure is it provides the federal, provincial, and territorial government institutions with new authority to share relevant information with banks and other financial service providers if the information will help put a stop to the funding of illegal blockades and illegal activities. All Canadian financial service providers will be able to immediately freeze or suspend an account of an individual or business affiliated with the blockades without a court order. All these new requirements and authorities will help mitigate the risks that Canadian financial institutions and crowdfunding platforms transact illicit funds, increasing the quality and quantity of the intelligence received by FINTRAC and allowing us to stop the flow of funding to these illegal blockades. Mr. Speaker, as I'm nearing the end of my time, it's important to highlight the safeguards and the parliamentary oversight and accountability measures contained within the Act. As was required, the government tabled the declaration of emergency so that this House could debate and decide upon the declaration. The government also tabled the orders as required before this House. The oversight this legislation gives us as parliamentarians is an important role to ensure it is acting within the law, and I take that responsibility incredibly seriously. We have seen support from a number of provinces for this action, including British Columbia, Newfoundland and Labrador, and Ontario. Our federal government is conscious of the need for transparency and parliamentary oversight as we undertake this action. And in the coming days, a parliamentary committee will be struck to provide oversight while the emergency measure is in effect. As well, an inquiry into the measures used during the emergency must be initiated once the state of emergency is over. Mr. Speaker, I want to conclude by thanking the residents of my riding of Davenport who have called and written to me all this week. I appreciated hearing their thoughts and having them reach out. It is an extraordinary moment in the history of our nation, and this is an extraordinary piece of legislation. It is absolutely the responsibility of our government, of myself as a parliamentarian, to make sure that I'm explaining why it is needed, why we need to invoke this public order emergency, and why this Emergency Act needed to be introduced. Thank you so much, Mr. Speaker.